Well, good morning, friends, members of the Parliament, senators, your excellencies. I would like to welcome you to the European Parliament, and thank you very much for coming to this event. And I also want to thank in advance the interpreters that will sure do a wonderful job. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to host this event today. Internationalist solidarity is an essential part of the work we do here in this house, inside and outside of this house, and it's one of the pillars of EH Bildu and the Basque pro-independence movement. We live in complex times where long-held certainties can disappear in a matter of hours of one press conference, and it often seems increasingly difficult to keep up to the speed of those historical events. Perhaps it's particularly important, therefore, to ensure that we do not lose perspective of many situations around the world that can come in and out of focus as the headlines shift from one priority to another. Today we have a great panel from three nations in the South Pacific and further two in Western Europe. We shall hear from them, and I trust that the exchanges of information today will prove to be useful in our respective struggles for peace, human rights and self-determination, and also in our work together in solidarity with one another. I would like to briefly introduce the speakers and say a couple of words about their context, although we really want to hear from them, of course. Benny Wenda is the president of the Provisional Government of West Papua. He represents the United Liberation Movement for West Papua. And following his escape from prison in West Papua, he lives in exile in the United Kingdom and continues his incessant work for the liberation of the West Papuan people. As to the West Papuan situation, I will defer to Mr. Wenda for a full presentation, but very briefly, the decolonization of what was known as the Dutch East Indies is an incomplete process. Whereas the colonial power of the time, the Netherlands, the United Nations and others foresaw a self-determination process for West Papua, Indonesia was able to take over the land, the resources and the people of West Papua by force with a farcical act of free choice in 1969. Yeah, that's right, 1969. Violence has since been recurrent, with Human Rights Watch as recently as last month reiterating a call to Indonesia to end the decades of racism, discrimination, intimidation and violence against indigenous Papuas. Robert Shoei is a senator at the French state for the FLNKS since 2023. He was the first pro-independence senator from Kanaki to be elected. And before that, he was the mayor of Olifu and the president of the Kanak province of the Loyalty Islands. His work in Paris and back home is key to the decolonization process in Kanaki, New Caledonia, which is, as you know, at a critical crossroads. Again, we'll hear directly from him about the history and current outlook of this process, but I'd like to restate our long-standing bonds of solidarity with the Kanak people, especially at this time, since last year's attempt by the French government to abandon the consensus of the 1998 Nouméa Agreement, which led to protests and repression with terrible consequences. I have to regret that we finally cannot have any representative from the French Polynesia, and it was originally intended just to put the situation in context that keep in mind in this event. I will recall that the group of islands now known as French Polynesia underwent a process of colonization by European powers, and after several wars and treaties were annexed by France in various stages during the 1880s. It's important to remember now, as Europe is immersed in war talk and turmoil, that Polynesia was the site of French nuclear tests from the 1970s and as late as the mid-90s. These actions were robustly protested by the Polynesian people, who won a victory with the end of the tests in 1996. French Polynesia was listed in the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories in 2013, so it's eligible for a UN-backed independence referendum. In recent years, Tamindwila Tira have had increasing electoral success to the extent that right now Mr. Muitai Brotherson is the president of the country. Gorka Lejabarrita is a member of the Spanish Senate for Basque Independence Party EH Bildu and head of political relations. He's vice chair of the International Parliamentarians for West Papua and has hosted the FLNKS, the Basque Country and the Spanish Senate and Congress on a number of occasions. And Mr. Carles Puigdemont needs little introduction. As President of Catalonia, he led efforts for self-determination to the referendum of October 2017, and as a result, he was forced into exile and became an MEP until last year. He's the leader of Junts for Catalonia political party and a long-standing supporter of the West Papuan cause. So let's start with the presentations by the panelists, and I will now hand the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Benny Webb.
Firstly, I would like to thank you on behalf of people of West Papua. I'm sure they're watching from all over the world, and today here in the European Parliament. Thank you to Fernando and Senator Gorka and Senator Robert from FLNKS and President Puigdemont and also ILWP representative Mr. Tim Hansen here as well, and ambassadors and representatives and all the friends and colleagues. Thank you very much. FLNKS and French Polynesia and West Papua is a forgotten colony in the Pacific. In the Pacific, also, you may know the Pacific is made up of the Polynesia, Micronesia, Melanesia. Rest of the Melanesia, some are already free, but West Papua and West Papua and New Caledonia, Kanak, are still fighting for their self-determination, and including the foreign Polynesia. All the Polynesia, some of them are already free, but they're still fighting. So now we bring the issue of three forgotten colony in the Pacific. We are bringing back to the in European Parliament, because former colony are still a member of the European Parliament, which is French and Dutch. We're not seeing Indonesia as a colonial, but we see in Indonesia is occupied. So that's moral obligation, French moral obligation to speak out about injustice in West Papua. Sadly, the human rights situation in West Papua is mount. Displacement, imprisonment is continuing. And you may know that what happened in Kanak recent years, the same, they demand the right to self-determination. West Papua case is almost forgotten. Indonesia committed ecocide, the genocide in West Papua, last 50 years. Why Indonesia get away with impunity? Because Indonesia banned the journalists, Amnesty International, ABC or BBC or all the journalists. Why? It's like situation in West Papua, it's apartheid, or North Korea. Block all the journalists. And I'm thank you to all the NGO and working tirelessly bring the issue to the European Parliament and other part of the world. They're working tirelessly. But people of West Papua not give up, they still continue. Today we hear FLNKS and West Papua come together collectively. We know that our brothers, sister, friend Polynesia, they couldn't make it. But we are, in the spirit, we are united. We are here. And thank you, Gorka, Fernando and President Puigdemont, you standing long-standing to speaking about the injustice and self-determination. This is important for us to bring this issue to European Parliament, because European Parliament is the place where we raise the issue, because we can talk about this right to self-determination in other country, other part of the world, but right here, Dutch and French, they are members of the European Union. And this is important. That's why we are bringing this issue back to here. And we unite to tell the world that our aspiration still alive. Even colonial master trying to put the issue under the carpet, but we exist. For example, my people in West Papua, this meeting, 7 regional, and with the Prime Minister of Edison Waromi and Bukta Tabuni as head of the Legislative Council, come out with the people of West Papua supporting this, because you cannot kill the my people, but in aspiration, spirit of the freedom still alive. And this is right place to bring the issue of West Papua and Kanak and Eflekais talk here. So that's why I'm proud, and I'm proud to my people, and they not give up, they're still strong. Even the West Papua is a militarized zone. Almost every year, last month, 450 Indonesia sent 1,000 of military. West Papua is a militarized zone in the Asia Pacific. Indonesia is not only committed human rights violation, genocide, but ecocide, because in the Pacific is we have the biggest oceans in the Pacific, but also West Papua is a large rainforest in the world. And I'm sure that people who are out there fighting for the climate change, climate justice, West Papua bring the offer. West Papua is a land of the world, a land of the planet Earth. If you save West Papua, mean save planet Earth. That is environmental who are fighting for the environmental justice. This is something that you can do to free West Papua so that you can see that the planet Earth can survive as well as a human being. Again, thank you very much for Fernando inviting us to express ourselves in the European Parliament. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Huerta. You know that you are always welcome in this place, as long as we are here at least. And Senator Lord Shoei, it's your turn.
Merci. Chers amis, je tiens d'abord à remercier les organisateurs pour l'invitation et de me donner une tribune à l'échelle du Parlement européen pour faire porter la voix de la Ligue du peuple kanak. Le 24 septembre 2025 marquera un triste anniversaire. Cela fait exactement 172 ans que la Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie vit sous tutelle de la France. Le 24 septembre 1853, à Balade, dans l'extrême nord de la Grande-Terre, le contre-amiral Février d'Espoir prend officiellement possession du territoire au nom de l'empereur Napoléon III. L'anniversaire de cette prise de position intervient alors que la Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie se trouve à nouveau dans une inquiétante impasse politique, puisque nous sommes à la sortie de l'accord Nouméa, actant une décolonisation encore inachevée. En effet, l'exécutif macroniste entend s'appuyer sur les 3 récentes consultations d'autodétermination qui, de 2018 à 2021, se sont soldées pour autant de victoires numériques du non à l'indépendance pour bâtir un nouveau projet, celui de la Nouvelle-Calédonie dans la République, dixit le président de la République lors d'un discours prononcé à Nouméa le 26 juillet. Nous, les indépendantistes, avions refusé de venir. Emmanuel Macron oublie bien commodément que les Kanaks, peuples autochtones de l'archipel, se sont exprimés lors de ces consultations à une écrasante majorité pour la pleine souveraineté de la Nouvelle-Calédonie, y compris par un boycott massif en 2021 lors du dernier des 3 votes organisés par l'État français en plein deuil kanak alors que le territoire venait de connaître sa première vague de Covid-19, une pandémie particulièrement meurtrière au sein des populations océaniennes. Cela fait 40 ans au moins, à travers les accords Matignon et les accords Nouméa, que le peuple kanak ne cesse de proclamer sa volonté unanime d'émancipation dans la trajectoire vers la pleine souveraineté, que ce soit en mettant un bulletin dans l'urne ou en luttant avec acharnement lorsque c'est nécessaire. Au cœur des événements tragiques de la décennie 1980, Jean-Marie Tjibaou, figure incontournable de la lutte d'indépendance, lançait cette phrase restée dans les mémoires. Les Kanaks sont là, ils seront toujours là, et ils vous emmerderont jusqu'à l'indépendance. Et il ajoutait, il n'y a pas de solution pour ce pays tant que la revendication kanak n'est pas prise en compte. Si les Kanaks subissent encore aujourd'hui la tutelle française, c'est qu'ils ont été mis en minorité sur le propriétaire depuis le tournant des années 1970. Le préambule de l'accord de Nouméa a ainsi reconnu les ombres et les lumières de la colonisation et le traumatisme durable qui en découle pour la population kanak d'origine. Le dernier accord signé en 1998 stipulait pourtant qu'au terme de 20 ans, c'est-à-dire en 2018, la Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie devait accéder à sa pleine souveraineté, avec la possibilité de choisir de la partager avec la France. Le pays est engagé dans une longue séquence de discussions après avoir vécu des violences durant toute l'année 2024. La raison principale, une volonté de passage en force de l'État français pour réformer le code électoral afin de continuer à maintenir la Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie dans le giron français. Après ces violences, le nouveau gouvernement issu de la dissolution de l'Assemblée nationale en juillet 2021, sous l'égide de François Bayrou, décide de changer de méthode et privilégier la méthode Michel Rocard qui a abouti à la signature du premier accord Matignon en 1981. Les partenaires de l'État, le FLNKS et les représentants des partis qui sont contre l'indépendance s'engagent dans une séquence de discussions. Le FLNKS reste dans sa trajectoire qui doit mener le pays vers sa pleine souveraineté et prévoit ce terme en 2030. Pourquoi 2030? Parce que c'est la fin de la 4e décennie internationale de l'élimination du colonialisme 2021-2030, dans laquelle elle a proclamé la période 2021-2030, 4e décennie de l'élimination du colonialisme. La Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie traverse une crise d'une ampleur inégalable due à la révolte des jeunes du quartier nord de Nouméa et de sa périphérie. Le 13 mai 2024 a sonné comme un ultime avertissement à l'État français. La jeunesse majoritairement kanak et océanienne des quartiers nord du pays est venue rappeler aux responsables politiques calédoniens que les politiques de rééquilibrage n'ont pas donné les résultats attendus suite à la signature de ces accords. Je rappelle que le sang a coulé depuis le 13 mai, que nous avons une centaine de prisonniers politiques, enfermés à cause de leurs idées politiques, et que le président du FLNKS est toujours actuellement enfermé à la prison de Mulhouse. Le FLNKS avait demandé à son dernier congrès sa présence dans les discussions et les négociations politiques et nous continuons de l'exiger. Le FLNKS, à l'issue de son 44e congrès, a nommé une équipe de discussion et de négociation afin de répondre à l'invitation du nouveau gouvernement à partir du 4 février 2025, d'abord à Paris et ensuite sur Nouméa début mars 2025. La délégation a pour mission d'aller chercher les éléments suivants. La base d'une négociation bilatérale solide et claire. Une méthodologie de travail efficiente et partagée. Un calendrier réaliste et précis débouchant sur une souveraineté totale après une période transitoire de 5 à 10 ans. Un contenu avec des thèmes prioritaires à travailler. Transfert des compétences régaliennes, la suite de l'accord de décolonisation, la suite des prisonniers politiques, les enjeux liés au corps électoral. il faudra des compromis politiques. Il pourrait porter sur le lien avec la France et l'autodétermination, la citoyenneté, le corps électoral, la gouvernance des institutions calédoniennes, en particulier sur le rôle des provinces. Notre pays est à la croisée des chemins, mais le sentier qui mène vers notre indépendance sera raccourci. Il suffit de tendre la main, parce qu'elle est à notre portée. Vive l'indépendance et vive Kanaki.
Merci, Mr. Shewi. It was a pleasure to hear your powerful speech. And I will pass the floor to Gorka Lejabarria.
Thank you, Fernando. Well, first I'd like to thank a colleague, comrade and friend Fernando Barrena and his team for organizing this event. To me it's an honor to share this table with Benny Wenda, with Senator Robert and with President Puigdemont. It is not the first time that we stand here. It is not the first time that we come to this institution to speak about the situation in West Papua, to speak about the situation in Kanaki, and I can say on behalf of everybody that we will continue to do so as long as injustice prevails. Well, I come from the Basque Country. I have spent all my life trying to get full sovereignty for the Basque Country, so I think I can say I'm quite familiar with this kind of struggle. Generations before me started the struggle in the Basque Country, and most likely generations after me will continue with that struggle. We met the Kanaki people in the French prisons, where Basque prisoners and Kanaki prisoners were held together in the same prisons, and this is how really the relation between us and them started back in the day. And it is through the relation we hold with the Kanaki people that we came to learn of the situation of their sisters and brothers in West Papua. I am very proud to be the Vice Chair of the International Parliamentarians for West Papua together with President Puigdemont. We do as much as we can, and we always feel we could do so much more as well, but we do as much as we can. To us, the important thing is what representatives from West Papua and New Caledonia have to say in this European institution, because we believe that the European Union has a responsibility and needs to have a say on the rights for West Papua and Kanaki to be respected. I believe that Trump's presidency and his disregard to international law has acknowledged the disrespect for international law, the lack of capacity of UN and other international agencies like never before. And I think this is an issue, an important issue, also when we speak about Kanaki and when we speak about West Papua. So those of us that have been for many years involved in national liberation movements, we know that international law has double, triple standards when it comes to certain national liberation struggles, when it comes to the rights of certain nations, peoples, when it comes to human rights, depending on who the violator of those human rights are. So it was nothing new to us, but the fact that the world has kind of waken up and is seeing that those international institutions that were set up after the Second World War in order to govern the world in a more democratic, peaceful way are not functioning, I think they bring also the Kanaki and West Papua issue into the agenda. Because, well, the colonization process of Kanaki and West Papua are also part of this global fight, this global struggle for international law to be applied. The fights of Papua, the fights of Kanaki are an issue of principle, of course. Every people has the right to self-determination. But there is also an issue of international law that is not being applied in their cases for different reasons. I think everybody knows Indonesia is not respecting fundamental human rights in West Papua. Indonesia is not respecting the right of West Papua to self-determination. And international community, especially the European Union, especially those member states that have an historic responsibility for this situation, cannot remain silent. And I think it is our duty as representatives in different institutions to remember this and to bring these realities to these institutions as well. France still treats Kanaki, New Caledonia, as its colony, and they think they are the masters and they can decide what Kanaks have to do. Different ministers, today the Minister of Ultramar, Manuel Valls, I think President Puigdemont and I, we know him and we know his CV when it comes to this kind of struggles. Well, I have to say that France as well has to apply, has to comply with international law when it comes to the situation in New Caledonia, and that Kanaki people obviously has the right to decide its future freely, including independence, in the way that the Noumea Peace Agreement established back in the day. And these peace agreements, they cannot be changed unilaterally. France has not the right to change the content of this agreement unilaterally, as they have in practice been trying to do. And again, like always, it's been the popular demonstrations, the popular protest of the Kanaki people that have forced France into another negotiation table. So I'll just end by saying that we are at a systemic global change, and that I think an important part of this systemic global change, of this new international law that we need in order to have this change in a civilized way, has to include the ending of the decolonization process, has to include, as the Human Rights Charter acknowledges, the right to self-determination for every people, and has to include the possibility, in this case, for West Papua and Kanaki to become independent if that's what the majority of the population want. It's a simple case, very difficult to gain, very difficult struggle, but I think that's our task in this kind of international forums. Thank you.
So now the time to take it for is yours, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to say I'm delighted to be here again in the European Parliament after several months away, and to be able to join you at this event, and particularly my dear friend Benny Wenda, with whom I have taken part in several events to discuss the situation in West Papua, and also I would like to thank Fernando Barrena, with whom I have also had the pleasure to sharing the stage a number of times for organizing this discussion panel. More than ever before, we are heading for a global landscape driven by the strength of great powers and the threat of using their force and the consequences of international relations. It is an indisputable fact that multilateral institutions have been weakened, with the European Union and Europe in general being fully affected by this. We will see how the whole international situation evolves, but in the meantime, we have to keep asking the same question that we have been asking over the last few years, when the geopolitical context was most favorable to the EU, but which the EU was unable to unwilling to answer. How can we uphold the right to self-determination within a global context regardless of the circumstances. While it seems unlikely that the rise in authoritarianism and the threat of the use of force will be favorable to democratic movements advocating self-determination, this does not mean that we have to give up our peaceful and democratic fights, albeit needing to realign them with a new global backdrop. The future of our people and our nations far transcends any certain set of circumstances. Fear is a legitimate response to many of us, that many of us might be feeling in the new world that is taking shape. But we have to build a path of hope. Self-determination is a democratic value that we must defend. It must be the axis of our stateless nations, societies, as a fundamental right that the international community must respect. There can be no future without freedom, and there is no freedom without personal and collective self-determination. Stateless nations like yours and mine must be at the forefront of this defense. But we also have to find a way to move on from being defensive and go on the attack. Kanaki New Caledonia has tried to exercise its right of self-determination through 2 referendums, coming close to gaining full independence, but in the end, France insisted on proceeding with a 3rd referendum with the aim to submission, which, naturally, the FLNKS boycotted. France continues to hold Christian Taine, as you said, the top Kanak pro-independence leader, in prison in mainland France, thousands of miles from his homeland, in a graphic illustration of the very worst of European colonialism, more suited in the 19th century than the 21st. It is the Kanak people themselves who must decide their own future. Nobody else can decide it from them and for them, and sooner or later, Paris will have to accept this if it wants to remain one of Europe's longest standing democracies. In Catalonia, we also applaud the recent victories of the pro-independence movements, the pro-independence movement Naui Nui, French Polynesia, the furthest from mainland France. The success of the pro-independence movement in the latest elections provides the legitimacy required to hold a referendum that gives the population a voice. France bears a great responsibility in both these cases. If it wants to lead Europe, France has to set an example of and democratically accept nations exercising self-determination, breaking away from its colonial past once and for all in both Melanesia and Polynesia. Returning to Melanesia, I would like to mention today that there is another nation waiting to be born, Bougainville. After 2019, the referendum, where 97.7% of voters cast were in favor of independence, Bougainville is expected to become a new nation in the international arena before the end of 2027, if the Papua New Guinea government and parliament do not stop the process towards independence. You are all aware of my constant defense of West Papua, like our colleagues here, Gorka Lejabarrieta. The West Papua rise to establish itself as an independent state. More than just this right, I also advocate the legitimacy of this independent nation, which was wrongfully annexed by Indonesia in the 1960s, with the necessary collaboration of a significant part of the international community. Fortunately, there are nations such as Vanuatu that support the rightful claims of our Papuan friends. Sadly, Indonesia continues its brutal repression in West Papua with extreme violations of human rights, including targeted assassinations, political prisoners, exiles, and international displacements. The EU has mechanisms available to put pressure on Indonesia, which it should used to ensure the situation changes. Unless there is an international mediation process that accepts the self-determination of West Papua, the conflict will simply generate more political violence. This is a particularly severe case, and it is shameful that the international community has turned a blind eye for so many years. As well, you know, in my country, Catalonia, we also held a referendum of independence in 2017, which was brutally repressed by Spain, a member of the EU, just like France, with the state's police forces being deployed to stop us voting. The pro-independence leaders were jailed and forced into exile, falsely accused of crimes punishable by decades in prison. But the persistence of the Catalan people and the Catalan political parties forced Spain to pass an amnesty law. However, the heart of the conflict remains the self-determination of Catalonia, and we continue fighting politically to achieve it. Your Pacific nations share a past in which your lands have been colonized and exploited, with foreign rule imposed, with the aim of eradicating your identity, but they failed. You have managed to keep your identity alive and pass it down generation to generation thanks to your tenacity and the desire to live in complete freedom governed by your own institutions. The three realities that the European Union, and particularly France, in the case of New Caledonia and French Polynesia, cannot ignore. The founding treaties of the European project enshrine respect for democracy, freedom, and human rights. And we cannot turn a blind eye to these realities, even though they lie far away in the Pacific. We will continue to raise awareness of your fights for freedom, because they are also our fights. And as I said before, there can be no future without freedom, and there is no freedom without self-determination. So thank you, friends, thank you very much.
Thanks, President Puigdemont, for inspiring words. We still have something like half an hour, so I think it's a good moment to open the floor for contributions. So just raise your hands and introduce yourselves if you want to proceed that way. Yeah, please. Introduce yourself.
Bien, bonjour à tous. I will speak in French because I know that we are translators. Je m'appelle Manuel Dever. Je travaille depuis maintenant 9 mois avec la direction politique du FLNKS. Et nous avons une certaine expérience du droit à l'autodétermination, puisque au sein du cabinet, nous conseillons le Front Polisario devant les juridictions de l'Union européenne. Et donc, comme vous le savez, le Front Polisario a obtenu l'annulation des accords avec l'Union européenne. Alors, je voudrais aujourd'hui vraiment centraliser sur la question de la Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie, en partant du droit européen. Il y a un double lien entre droit à l'autodétermination et droit de l'Union européenne concernant la Kanaki. Le premier lien d'abord, c'est que la Kanaki est un pays et territoire d'outre-mer de l'Union européenne, et ce régime repose sur un régime d'association qui est fondé sur un décalque de l'article 73 de la Charte des Nations Unies. C'est-à-dire que quand les rédacteurs du traité de Rome ont voulu intégrer la question des territoires d'outre-mer, ils n'ont pas pris la position française, ils se sont référés à la position des Nations Unies, et donc ils ont repris la terminologie de la Charte et de l'article 73. Ça, c'est le premier lien. Le deuxième lien, c'est évidemment le droit à l'autodétermination. J'ai parlé du travail qu'on avait fait sur le Sahara occidental, ce territoire non autonome, avec ce grand peuple sahraoui qui a le droit à l'autodétermination et à l'indépendance. Et ce sont exactement les mêmes principes qui sont engagés en Kanaki, Nouvelle-Calédonie. Ces principes, ils sont au nombre de 4. Le premier d'abord, c'est le libre choix du statut politique, que tout le monde connaît bien, mais c'est aussi le droit à l'intégrité territoriale. La Kanaki a un statut séparé et distinct par rapport à la France. Ça n'est pas un territoire français. La France n'est pas souveraine. elle est seulement puissance administrante, et si elle est puissance administrante, c'est qu'elle n'a pas de souveraineté, justement. Pourquoi? Parce que cette souveraineté, elle appartient au peuple du territoire. Et ce peuple, il a le droit au respect de son intégrité territoriale. Le troisième élément, c'est le droit de souveraineté permanente sur les ressources naturelles, que tout le monde connaît bien. Et le quatrième élément, c'est le droit à l'unité nationale. Alors sur cette base, je voudrais faire deux observations. C'est la question d'abord de la troisième consultation. Sur la troisième consultation, le critère en droit international, il est bien identifié, c'est le critère de la volonté libre et authentique. Pour savoir si un peuple choisit vraiment l'intégration, s'il choisit vraiment l'imposte, s'il a vraiment choisi, la question c'est l'authenticité de la volonté qu'il a exprimée. En Kanaki, la base du peuple colonial, c'est le peuple kanak, parce que c'est lui le peuple premier, et c'est à partir du peuple kanak que se construit le peuple de Nouvelle-Calédonie. Les Kanaks, ils ont une excellente expression, ils disent que c'est le poteau central au centre de la case, et c'est à partir de ce poteau qu'on fait la société interculturelle. Quand on regarde la troisième consultation auquel les Kanaks n'ont pas pris part, et c'est accepté par les autorités françaises, la question est simple. Comment est-ce qu'on peut avoir un référendum d'autodétermination valable sans la participation du peuple kanak, qui est le peuple premier du territoire, celui à partir duquel se construit le peuple du territoire? Cette troisième consultation, c'est une plaisanterie. La deuxième problématique avec la troisième consultation, c'est la question de l'intégration. La France nous dit, par 3 fois, le peuple du territoire a dit non à l'indépendance, confirmant la volonté de rester français. Mais il n'y a rien qui va dans cette phrase. Parce que le territoire n'est pas français, il a un statut séparé et distinct. Ça, c'est le premier problème. Et ensuite, le deuxième problème, c'est que pour l'autodétermination et l'indépendance, c'est fondamentalement un régime de liberté. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a une présomption des peuples de vouloir s'émanciper de la colonisation. Et donc, c'est pour ça qu'on peut faire des accords d'indépendance pour arriver à l'autodétermination. Par contre, s'il faut l'intégration, il faut forcément une consultation populaire. Et quand on regarde le vote, mais à nouveau, c'est une mauvaise plaisanterie. On voit qu'il y a 95% en faveur de l'intégration à la France, mais ceux qui votent en réalité, c'est 40% de la population. Comment la France peut-elle faire une intégration du territoire sur un vote à 40%? Ça n'est pas sérieux. La deuxième observation que je veux faire, c'est sur le dégel du corps électoral, et c'est la question de l'unité nationale. Vous l'avez dit, il y a un accord de Nouméa. Cet accord de Nouméa, ce n'est pas un tract politique, c'est un accord juridique. Et c'est un accord d'écolonisation, il est soumis au droit international. La France, elle ne peut pas le modifier comme ça. L'autre élément aussi, c'est évidemment le droit à l'unité nationale. On a une pratique constante de ces puissances coloniales qui à chaque fois cherchent à toucher, à tripatouiller, trafiquer la démographie du territoire pour modifier la position du peuple et conserver le territoire. C'est interdit en droit international. Et donc, ce que fait Israël à l'égard de la Palestine en colonisant le territoire, quand la France envoie des gens de métropole là-bas, c'est une violation du droit à l'autodétermination qui prohibe la colonisation de peuplement, au même titre que le droit international humanitaire. Alors, moi je pense que l'analyse en définitive, c'est que la France elle a conscience de ces limites-là. Et elle comprend bien que l'Assemblée générale n'est pas une chambre d'enregistrement qui va valider le troisième consultation ou accepter comme ça un traficage du corps électoral. C'est pour ça qu'elle revient négocier. Et donc je pense que c'est la grande force actuelle du FLNKS, c'est d'investir ce terrain du droit international parce que c'est le terrain le plus favorable pour lui, parce que l'Assemblée générale n'acceptera jamais de retirer la Kanaki de la liste des territoires non autonomes sur une troisième consultation qui n'est pas valable. Le dernier élément que je mentionnerai en guise de conclusion, c'est pour mesurer la force de nos arguments, on a une certaine expérience du droit à l'autodétermination devant la Cour de justice, parce que c'est nous qui avons fait reconnaître le droit à l'autodétermination du peuple sahraoui en droit européen. Si la France ne décolonise pas le territoire correctement en Kanaki, ça ne sera que des ennuis pour les 10, 15 années, 20 ans qui viennent. Il faut que la France comprenne que le peuple de Nouvelle-Calédonie, en tant que titulaire du droit à l'autodétermination, il est sous la protection de la Cour de justice de l'Union européenne, qui a reconnu le droit des peuples. Et donc si la France ne décolonise pas correctement, il y aura des actions possibles devant les juridictions de l'Union européenne pour casser la colonisation française. Donc la meilleure issue pour tout le monde, c'est une solution négociée dans le respect du droit international et dans le respect du droit à l'autodétermination du peuple du territoire. Je vous remercie.
I'm speaking today as a legal advisor to the West Papuan movement, which is a position that I've been in now for about 8 years. And I'm going to talk specifically about the EU negotiations for a trade agreement with Indonesia, and also briefly about the ICJ and their role in this, potential role in this. So I think a lot has been covered already. Anyone who is interested in human dignity or a rules-based order should support self-determination in the Pacific, and should support the West Papuan movement and the Kanaki movement in New Caledonia. It's been mentioned that international law is under strain right now, and the norms that we have become used to in recent decades are under strain. It should be remembered that the right to self-determination is a moral right, and it's a position that exists outside of that context. Although international law is certainly a key asset for the West Papuan movement, as mentioned by my colleague. So it's important that the EU is involved, because the responsibility from this part of the world to the Pacific is immense, based on the shared history. Very briefly, the right to self-determination is a right of all peoples to freely pursue their economic, social and cultural development. It's recognised as a principle of general international law that has its origins in customary international law. It's protected in multiple international treaties, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Nearly every member state of the UN is signed up to that. It's also recognised in the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. It was explicitly confirmed as a right in a 1960 declaration at the UN General Assembly, stating that the subjugation of peoples to the subjection of peoples to alien subjugation, domination and exploitation constitutes a denial of fundamental human rights, is contrary to the Charter of the United Nations, and is an impediment to the promotion of world peace and cooperation. We've stated this before in here and many other places, but and Mr. Beniwenda stated this already, but it's important to repeat that very clearly, under international law, West Papua is a case of incomplete decolonisation. It is a place of occupation and a place of ongoing severe human rights violations. And this call for self-determination is it's not a request, it's a right under international law, and all states have obligations to assist that. What happened in the 60s in West Papua was a violation of Article 73 that was mentioned earlier. It's a breach of Indonesia's treaty obligations in general under the UN Charter, and also specifically under the New York Agreement, even if that agreement was valid, which it probably was not. So recognising all of that, West Papua should be an issue for the UN Decolonisation Committee, and our friends in New Caledonia are on that list. West Papua is currently not, but the case of New Caledonia being reinscribed in 1986 and French Polynesia in 2013 show what is possible in theory, and also what still needs to be done. What should the EU do? So there's a specific point about the trade agreement that I'll just go through briefly. So the EU and Indonesia have been negotiating a trade agreement now for 9 years. There was various investigations about environmental standards and integration of different sectors and so on done by the EU during this time. I've read hundreds of pages of these investigations and research and background and so on. They don't mention the conflict in West Papua, which is, on the face of it, just absurd. Even if you were only interested in a trade agreement and about the financial integration of various sectors, you would need to mention an ongoing armed conflict, and certainly a significant violation of international law. So that is deeply problematic and bizarre. Those trade negotiations are due to restart after a bit of a pause this year, and there's been an intention stated to conclude them in June. So there's a responsibility on all of us to raise awareness about that and push for the cessation of those negotiations until West Papua is correctly recognised as an issue within them, or really outside them. Worth noting that the EU has sent millions to Indonesia for use in West Papua since 2001 in particular, fundamentally contributing to the funding of the occupation and the extraction of wealth from West Papua. I think just briefly, maybe to conclude about the trade agreement, it's important to note, as my friend mentioned already, some elements of any EU trade agreement with Indonesia may be illegal because of the status of West Papua under international law, and that was shown recently in the case of Western Sahara. Whether there's a free trade agreement or not, any EU-based companies are obliged to look for free, prior and informed consent from the population in West Papua before engaging, and any reasonably diligent exercise of that will show that it's not possible to operate in West Papua without enabling the violent military occupation. About the ICJ, and this is something that the movement is moving towards, which is over the next few years, hopefully there will be a vote at the UN General Assembly calling for an advisory opinion from the ICJ about the legality of Indonesia's administration of West Papua. And passing that vote will obviously require a majority of states, and that will require all of us and as many people as possible to put pressure on each UN member state to vote in favour of that request to the ICJ, or at the very least to abstain. It'll be probably be quite a neutral ask, just asking what the legal status is, and that should be something that any UN member state, anyone who believes in international law, should be able to support. Simply asking the question about the legal status. And that's something that has been done several times before, recently with the Chagos Islands and Mauritius, previously with Palestine, previously with Namibia and others. If there's political will to ask that question, then we're confident, the movement is confident that the ICJ advisory opinion will mention that West Papua is pending decolonisation and should at the very least join their friends on the decolonisation committee list. Thanks.
Mesdames et messieurs les parlementaires européens, mesdames et messieurs les représentants de Maui-Nui, même s'ils ne sont pas là, de Kanaki, de West Papua, du Vanuatu ici présent, mais aussi de Scaleria, de Catalonia, monsieur le député Fernando Barena de Scaleria Bildu. Merci pour cette initiative importante sur les luttes anticoloniales dans le Pacifique. Donc à l'invitation du bureau politique du FLNKS, j'interviens au nom du comité Justice et Liberté pour Kanaki, association qui œuvre pour le respect du droit à l'autodétermination du peuple kanak. Mon propos sera centré sur la situation carcérale en Kanaki. La Kanaki a été à feu et à sang depuis 1 an, encore et toujours victime du colonisateur français qui ne conçoit sa relation aux autres que dans la domination, se fantasmant un rôle de puissance dans le Pacifique dont il n'a jamais relevé. La 3e consultation référendaire d'autodétermination imposée en 2021 n'a aucune valeur vu ces conditions. Comme rappelé, la Kanaki reste un territoire non autonome inscrit sur la liste des pays à décoloniser pour lequel la France n'est que puissance administrante et n'a aucune souveraineté. Pour autant, la militarisation du territoire a été croissante. La répression depuis le printemps 2024 a été féroce. La force létale a été utilisée immédiatement dans les rues de Nouméa contre la population et a fait de nombreux blessés, dont par balle. Une douzaine de Kanaks au moins a été assassinés par les forces de l'ordre et les milices de colons racistes armés qui ont organisé de véritables chasses à l'homme en direction des quartiers à majorité kanak. Nous dénonçons le classement pour légitime défense par le parquet de Nouméa en décembre dernier du dossier d'un jeune kanak assassiné par balle à Caméré en juin 2023. Vérité et justice doivent être faites pour l'ensemble des victimes de la répression coloniale. La discrimination raciale envers le peuple kanak et les communautés océaniennes est structurelle en Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie. Alors que les accords de Matignon et Oudinot en 1988 et l'accord de Nouméa en 1998 comprenaient des clauses sur le rééquilibrage vis-à-vis de la discrimination à l'emploi et l'accès aux postes à responsabilité pour les Kanaks, les chiffres de ces inégalités restent alarmants. Aussi, la discrimination raciale fait partie des mesures ségrégationnistes récentes de la province sud. Discrimination pour l'accès à l'école, aux aides sociales, au transport, et sont ciblés les Kanaks. Cette discrimination raciale est d'autant plus marquée au regard de la population carcérale. Plus de 90% des détenus en Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie sont Kanaks. Les autres sont d'origine océanienne. La prison du camp Est à Nouméa est l'ancien bagne colonial et compte près de 600 détenus pour une capacité d'environ 200 de moins. La nouvelle prison de Koné compte 120 places, a permis d'enfermer plus de Kanaks. Avec la construction d'un nouveau centre pénitentiaire d'ici 2032, la Kanaky Nouvelle-Calédonie comptera le double de détenus actuels sur le territoire et proportionnellement 3 fois plus de places de prison que la France. La prison du camp Est est la première à avoir fait l'objet d'une recommandation en urgence du contrôleur général des lieux de privation de liberté en 2019. En 2020, les conditions de détention sont dénoncées par le tribunal administratif et le Conseil d'État. En 2024, le tribunal administratif de Nouméa a condamné l'État français pour sa lenteur à exécuter les injonctions précédentes. Et la situation n'a pourtant pas changé. Une surpopulation de 160%, encore 173 matelas au sol en décembre 2024. Des cellules sont dans des containers maritimes, normalement pour 2 personnes, mais aussi en tasse 3, 4, voire 5 détenus. Donc nous vous invitons à lire l'enquête récente de l'Observatoire international des prisons sur les conditions au camp Est, qui vient d'être publiée récemment. Suite à plusieurs mutineries contre les conditions indignes, la situation s'est aggravée depuis mai 2024. Le camp Est a été assiégé par l'armée, avec renfort de différentes équipes d'intervention et une répression violente. De nombreux témoignages recueillis font état en mai de restrictions de nourriture, de traitements inhumains et dégradants, de violences physiques sur les détenus et d'actes de torture. Selon des témoignages, un jeune détenu kanak, originaire de Kanala, serait mort en mai 2024 suite à la répression. Un deuxième décès en détention aurait eu lieu à la même période, et nous n'avons pas de détails. Le système carcéral, c'est la boîte noire du système colonial. Il est urgent de s'interroger sur les conditions actuelles au camp Est. L'État français a par ailleurs, dans la plus grande opacité, organisé des déportations massives, donc des déplacements forcés, de détenus kanaks vers des prisons en France, à plus de 17 000 km de chez eux. La déportation de 7 militants indépendantistes de la CCAT, cellule de coordination des actions de terrain, en détention préventive, dont le président du FLNKS, Christian Théin, en font partie. Ceci concerne aussi 63 détenus kanaks que nous avons localisés dans une quarantaine de prisons en France internationale, et ce, vers un territoire de l'espace de l'Union européenne, en violation du droit international. À cet égard, leur situation doit être interrogée sous l'angle de l'article 12 du Pacte international de 1966 sur les droits civils et politiques, qui garantit à toute personne le droit de circuler librement dans tout pays, de le quitter et d'y revenir librement, ce qui inclut de rester dans son propre pays. À plus de 17 000 km de leur famille, c'est une violation du droit à la vie privée et familiale, et ce, sur le sol européen. Les conditions de déportation ont été inhumaines, menottées pendant plus de 20 heures, sans intimité pour aller aux toilettes. Certains détenus sont en train d'être libérés en fin de peine, ou par aménagement, livrés à eux-mêmes sur le territoire français, sans pouvoir payer leur billet retour. L'administration a refusé de les libérer chez eux à Nouméa. L'État français doit rapatrier immédiatement tous les détenus qui le souhaitent. Sachez que ces déportations ne sont pas nouvelles, pratiquées tous les ans par l'État colonial français à des nombres plus réduits qu'en 2024. Malgré l'abolition de la loi sur le bail, l'État français continue cette pratique dans le sens inverse qu'à la fin du XIXe siècle, en déportant vers le territoire français des détenus kanaks. Depuis janvier 2025, de nouvelles déportations ont eu lieu. Enfin, soulignons que le respect du droit à l'autodétermination et à l'indépendance constitue la condition sine qua non de la jouissance des autres droits humains. L'État français a enclenché une répression coloniale à grande échelle, ciblant les individus pour casser la lutte collective du peuple pour ses droits. Inversant les faits et les responsabilités, l'État français criminalise l'action des militants de la cellule de coordination des actions de terrain, ainsi que l'ensemble du mouvement indépendantiste kanak, alors que ce sont eux qui font respecter le droit international quand la France le viole. La prison et l'enfermement ont toujours été des outils de répression coloniale. Nous exigeons la libération immédiate des prisonniers politiques kanaks enfermés à Nouméa ou déportés en France, dont le président du FLNKS, qui sont des défenseurs des droits humains et du respect du droit à l'autodétermination de leur propre peuple. Je vous remercie.
Yes, good morning everyone, honorable panel members. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing the most important inputs with us. As international spokesperson for the United Liberation Movement, I really want to add some substance to the reality on the ground in West Papua, adding to what Mr. Interim President Beniwenda have shared. Regarding the urgent situation in West Papua, it's important to realize that at this very moment, reports by several universities have shown that 500,000 West Papuans have been victims since the Netherlands transferred the sovereignty to Indonesia in the early 60s. At a total population of less than 1.2 million, this is clearly a decline of a population. Add to that we have become a minority in our own country since the transmigration project by Indonesia, since they invaded West Papua. So you can clearly see a policy of ethnic cleansing of the indigenous West Papuans. Add to that West Papua today live as most poorest citizens in their own country, knowing that West Papua is the richest province of Indonesia, housing the world's largest gold mine, second largest copper mine, and many other resources. West Papuans are physically intimidated on a daily basis. President Beniwenda told it that we can't fall back on our human rights, on the laws, even on Indonesian laws. Peaceful democracies are being disrupted by clear Indonesian policies. Just last week, Indonesian government passed a really notorious law which allows Indonesian military in service could continuously work in ministries. This is a really red flag which has sparked protest at this very moment in West Papua and Indonesia. Also knowing that the newly elected president is a war criminal for war crimes in East Timor is really something that we should take notice of. Looking at what the European Union can do regarding Western Sahara blocking trade deals, they should exactly copy that behavior. If you look what Indonesia is committing to the indigenous people of West Papua, knowing that West Papua, together with Papua New Guinea, housing the world's largest tropical island, understanding what's happening in both New Caledonia, Kanaki as West Papua. Kanaki is the world's fourth largest producer of nickel. That's why France is using that territory also for their energy transition. Indonesia is the third largest producer of nickel. At this very moment, Indonesia's policy is drowning the Pacific. So I really applaud Vanuatu for the leadership in the fighting against climate change. But I really see disturbing trade deals at this very moment in the Pacific, in Melanesia, knowing that Indonesia has surpassed China in using coal, the most dirtiest form of fossil fuels. Indonesia is using those in also disrupting the third largest rainforest in West Papua, declining in a very rapid speed. So if you combine this together, West Papuans are living as poorest citizens. We are declining in population. More military troops are coming in. Foreign press are not allowed. The United Nations have been blocked for 3+ years. All the flags are red. So that's why we are really happy with the panel here. This is the right place to speak these kind of words to the leaders here. We're talking about democratic values, about the standards that they're using for the conflict in the European Union as well. So that's why we are hoping that the leaders cannot look away from Indonesian and France behavior to the colonies in the Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your contribution. Well, it seems that it's time to bring this event to the end. I want to thank you everyone for your contributions. I'm sure that you will agree that this was an inspiring and powerful meeting. It was a pleasure to hear our friends from West Papua and Kanak. A determination for the freedom of your countries is clearly outstanding and remarkable. It's important to bring the voice of the resistance to the colonial behavior of European states. I would say that colonialism is not a thing of the past. Colonialism is an outstanding characteristic of the stance of the European states that still implement foreign policies based on the lack of respect to human rights and the right of peoples to self-determination. And our role beyond solidarity as Basques, as Catalans, is to expose that situation in this parliament, at least as long as we are present in this house. I want to express my political party's determination and my personal engagement in favor of the decolonization of West Papua, Kanaki and the French Polynesia. It's crucial to keep on defending the right of peoples of the world to self-determination as a democratic right that cannot be avoided in the name of particular political or partisan visions. It's the peoples, in this case of West Papua, Kanaki, French Polynesia, Catalonia, or the Basque Country, the ones entitled to decide on their own future. And that's the view we defend in our countries and we'll keep doing in the nearest future. So let me say that you will not walk alone and that you will always be able to count on our support. So thank you so much. Thanks to the panelists and the notable attendees. Thanks everybody for attending this meeting. And thanks to the technicians and the interpreters for the wonderful job done. Thank you so much.